This may explain why, since ants at least, various species have sought ways to tighten through mutual regulation systems the intra-organism variability. Resonance and intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity first. One of the reasons why I have presented my material this way is to combat the notion that two minds may have a direct contact with each other, that you can experience what I experience. This position is often presented using Daniel Stern's notion of intersubjectivity. I want to show that intersubjectivity is an important, necessary awareness and conscious illusion, without which many forms of interaction would be impossible, but nevertheless not an actual, direct bond between two awareness systems. Example of relations where the impression that there exist strong forms of intersubjective experiences are those of love, between lovers, children and parents, friends, etc. Moments when it becomes obvious that the impression of intersubjectivity is an illusion may be a divorce, when the husband explains to you that he never could have imagined that his wife would demand her share of the family fortune with so much greed and hate. Or when a parent discovers that his teenage child is on drugs. The parent then typically says that he could never have imagined that this child they had raised and known for so long could have developed such a secret life. A common notion in such situations is that someone is discovering that a person who was experienced as an intimate partner is in fact a total stranger. To understand what has happened, one has to remember that only meaningless physical and chemical signals travel from one organism to another. Then the meaningless automatic data processing in the nervous system. And finally, all the awareness illusions that edited how one perceives the other, as well as oneself with the other. When love is experienced, intersubjectivity is automatically experienced. But this comfortable impression, which can be blissful, is nevertheless a form of consciousness constructed by the non-conscious coordination of two aware systems. Resonance. Another term that is often used to designate forms of magical interpersonal experience is that of resonance. David Boadella and Rubens Kingle have published extensive analysis of this phenomenon and its relevance for psychotherapy. The difference for me between resonance and intersubjectivity is that resonance precedes intersubjectivity. It creates the non-conscious logistics that can support the construction of an intersubjective experience. Resonance designates a series of non-conscious regulation systems that allow various forms of non-conscious attunement between several organisms. Many modules in one organism are designed to process incoming information, to evaluate what must be done in an interaction with other organisms. I have already mentioned a set of modules that analyze faces and some of their mimics. Another set of spontaneous non-conscious activations are those known as mirror neurons. These neurons are activated when modules have detected that someone is trying to grasp an object. When this happens, the organism activates the motor system it would have used to grasp this object in the same way. This is a typical resonance effect. It is non-conscious. 2, it is rapid. 3, it is an inner reaction to what another person is doing. When mirror neurons are activated, the person in whom this activation occurs is not aware that this is happening. But if, for other reasons, this person wants to imitate the other, he may feel more pleasure and more ease to to imitate him than if he did not have mirror neurons. For example, let us consider children who pass through a phase of wanting to imitate what the other does. Psychologists have studied the need to imitate. In their studies, they show that there are many reasons why this imitation is required by a child's developmental systems. The mechanisms involved are numerous, both at an interpersonal and individual level. Within this galaxy of mechanisms, mirror neurons may be a form of facilitator when imitation involves grasping an object. The implication for awareness system is that mirror neurons may eventually modulate impressions in a subtle, implicit way. In the case of mirror neurons, we have an example of a form of resonance that does not require the participation of awareness to complete its task. But there are many interactive regulation systems that require the participation of awareness systems and the formation of similar forms of awareness in several organisms that may allow the emergence of a common conscious construction. As for awareness, these regulation systems require an immense quantity of exchange of non-conscious information with a few conscious traits. The schema is close to the one I have already shown for the neurology of awareness, except that this time the logistics mobilizes two complete organisms. Consciousness is a form of communication. This is true for language, emotional expression, table manners, etc. All these are structured by non-conscious processes which require various forms of calibration only awareness devices can provide. Communication is thus an immense series of small, specific inter-organism regulations which calibrate intra-organism regulations in such a way that some sort of common representation can be constructed in several organisms. The immensity of this work is particularly impressive when one remembers that all that can pass between two bodies are physical and chemical phenomena that have no meaning in themselves, which brings us back to what I said on the perception of objects. The telephone is a good example, as it reduces vocal patterns to electrical patterns that pass through complex cabling systems, which can then be decoded as voice and speech by a telephone that is maybe a continent away. This allows me to come back to the subject of intersubjectivity and love. If intersubjectivity is a need, and if it is one of the properties of love, then love is a sentiment that mobilizes all the awareness systems and non-conscious system which will allow a form of intense exchanges between two organisms. Because love requires an intense intersubjective experience, it will require of the organism that it spends as much time and energy as possible to think and dream of the other, to explore the other with all its interactive capacities. The impression of intersubjectivity may be a necessary illusion, but because it is necessary, it will increase the speed and quality and duration of non-conscious interpersonal regulation systems, of inter-organism resonance systems, and thus create a database that can support a need for maximum intersubjective experience. The pains of divorce are caused when the illusion is no more supported by such intense non-conscious involvements, and that other forms of necessary illusions have not formed themselves. Consciousness and awareness. Why distinguish awareness and consciousness? Because I think that the combination of the two is a key element of psychotherapy. Research by Vilma Bucci shows that when a communication becomes multimodal between a patient and a therapist, the therapeutical relation is often productive. Multimodal means that a gesture can be answered by a sentence or a sentence by a gesture. But there is more. It would seem that a process of awareness-driven co-construction helps. Individual awareness systems tend either to forget experiences as soon as they begin or to get stuck in recurrent reformulations that prevent new experiences from forming themselves. When one passes from awareness to consciousness, a mid-range modality appears through which experience becomes themes that can exist and enter awareness at various speeds. Other authors use different words and notions to develop similar ideas of why distinguishing consciousness from awareness may be useful for therapists. Beatrice Beebe has shown that this is not only true in verbal communication, but also in body communication. She shows how reacting at a mid-range speed with either depressed or overexcited children helps them to find a reassuring mode of regulating themselves. In other words, by creating forms of common, shared awareness in therapy sessions, the setting can help awareness systems to find new forms of non-conscious regulations and to strengthen their necessary illusions in relevant ways. She also recommends that one distinguishes self-regulation and interpersonal regulation clearly, while acknowledging that they are both part of the same system. Being able to auto-regulate comfortably when one talks with a problematic parent creates different communication system than being incapable of regulating oneself when one confronts a problematic parent. Edward Tronick distinguishes individual states of consciousness from dyadic states of consciousness. He then shows how the construction of dyadic consciousness can help the person involved to modify their way of thinking, to form richer forms of awareness, which will then support modifications of communication strategies. These modifications can have catastrophic implications when infants are raised by intrusive or depressive mothers, but they can also be modified in a therapeutic context to become positive for the patient. George Downing has established therapeutic methods using video analysis to refine how consciousness, awareness, and non-conscious processes can be integrated by both therapists and patients. Since I have differentiated awareness and consciousness in this way, I have also paid more attention to distinguish what patients are aware of on the one hand and what they share. Working on the construction of shared awareness is an essential dimension of the construction of love. Thank you.